Welcome back, everyone, to the Seniors Confessions channel. My 61-year-old mother-in-law demanded I give her $250 million to get a breast augmentation. When I refused, she immediately slapped me. "You dare to be stingy with me?" My husband immediately growled one sentence that left her speechless. My name is Ton Van, and I am 34 years old this year. From the outside, many would probably think I have a quite peaceful life. My husband and I own a small flower shop near the Central Market. The income isn't huge, but it's enough to live on. My husband, Min Kang, works as a warehouse manager for a large electronics company. We don't have children yet because we spent the first few years focusing on finances, and then things just kept getting delayed. Even so, I have never thought of that as being particularly unhappy. The thing that has made me exhausted for nearly 10 years is my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law's name is Myla, and she is 61 years old this year. She is the type of woman who is extremely prideful, likes to compete with others, and is especially afraid of aging. Some people prefer peace as they get older, but she is the complete opposite. The older she gets, the more obsessed she becomes with her appearance, saving face, and maintaining a woman's value. Once, she stood in front of the mirror for over half an hour before turning to ask me, "Van, do you think my face is sagging lately?" I was arranging flowers and just gave a light smile upon hearing that. "When we get older, everyone ages, Mom." I didn't expect that one sentence to make her face darken immediately. "You mean I'm very old, don't you?" I was so fed up that I didn't want to explain any further. After so many years as her daughter-in-law, I understand her personality very well. If anyone accidentally wounds her pride, she can stay angry for an entire week. She loves watching cosmetic sales live streams and videos about women rejuvenating or secrets to staying young in your 50s and 60s. Her phone is always blasting at full volume. Things like, "Women look old because they don't know how to take care of themselves," or, "If you want to keep your husband, you have to know how to look beautiful." One day, while eating, she turned to me and made a pointed remark. "A woman who lets herself go is just handing her husband over to someone else on a silver platter." I knew she was saying it to provoke me, so I just stayed silent. But Min Kang just put his bowl down and said, "Mom, stop watching so much stuff online. You believe whatever people say." Mrs. Myla immediately scowled. "What do you know about women's psychology to speak up?" My husband is the quiet type. Sometimes I find him cold, but after living together for a long time, I understand he isn't heartless. He just doesn't like arguing, especially with his own mother. All this time, whenever my mother-in-law nags or gives me a hard time, he usually chooses silence to let it pass. Sometimes I feel very hurt, but thinking back, he's caught between his mother and his wife, so I let it be. I tell myself that if I endure a little more, the family will be at peace. But I never expected that this very endurance would make things spiral further out of control. For about the last half year, my mother-in-law has started getting close to a group of wealthy middle-aged women in the neighborhood. The one she mentions most is Mrs. Tuyat Mai, a woman over 50 who dresses very young, wearing heavy makeup and tight-fitting dresses every day. From the very first day I met Mrs. Mai, I didn't have a good impression of her. She looked me up and down and laughed. "Your daughter-in-law is young. Why does she dress so old-fashioned? Women need to know how to invest in themselves." My mother-in-law heard that and laughed delightedly. From that day on, she started to change completely. She buys new clothes constantly, practices makeup, and even films dancing clips to post online. One night, near 10 p.m., I went to the kitchen for water and saw her standing in front of her phone camera, fixing her hair and pouting her lips to pose. I was so startled that I froze in my tracks for a few seconds. Seeing me, she immediately turned off the phone and snapped at me. "What are you looking at? Are old people not allowed to have fun?" I quickly shook my head. I didn't say anything, Mom. But in my heart, I started to feel uneasy. I don't know why, but I always have the feeling that Mrs. Tuyat Mai is influencing my mother-in-law in a very strange direction. Every time she comes back from hanging out with her, my mother-in-law changes a little bit more. She looks in the mirror more often. And she keeps asking questions like, "Do you think people would laugh if a 60-year-old woman is still beautiful?" Or, "Do men really like women who know how to take care of themselves?" At first, I just thought she was afraid of aging like any other woman, but over time, I noticed something extreme in her eyes, as if she were trying to hold on to something before it was too late. One afternoon, as I was closing up the flower shop, Min Kang stopped by to pick me up. On the way, he suddenly asked, "Does Mom talk to Ms. Mai often these days?" I nodded. "They video call every single day." He was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "I don't like her." I turned to look at my husband. Why would you say that out of the blue? Min Kang tightened his grip on the steering wheel slightly. I have a feeling she isn't as simple as she seems. Before I could ask any more questions, his phone rang. The moment he looked at the screen, his face darkened instantly. It was my mother-in-law on the other end. She was shouting so loudly that I could hear her clearly even sitting next to him. Come home right now. I have something important to discuss. I didn't know at the time that this very call was the beginning of the biggest nightmare in my marriage. That evening, as soon as we got home, I saw my mother-in-law already waiting in the living room. She was wearing a navy velvet dress, her hair styled in a voluminous puff. Her lipstick was a deeper shade of red than usual. On the table were several color-printed flyers and a phone playing a video of a middle-aged woman before and after cosmetic enhancements. Seeing us walk in, Myla didn't ask how we were, but just tilted her chin and said, "Sit down, I have something to discuss." Min Kang pulled up a chair next to me, his eyes glancing quickly at the papers on the table. I could clearly see his jaw tighten, but he remained silent. My mother-in-law picked up her phone and opened a picture of Tuyat Mai from the party that afternoon. In the photo, Mai was wearing a tight red dress, standing among a group of women, hands on her hips, chest pushed out, wearing a smile as radiant as someone who had just won a big hand in cards. Myla looked at the photo for a long time and said, "Do you know I went to Mai's birthday party today? She just had a breast augmentation, and she looks a decade younger." Before I could answer, she continued, her voice trembling with frustration. Everyone in the village was full of praise, some saying her Ao Dai made her look younger than a 40-year-old, others saying women with money must know how to upgrade themselves. Only I sat there like a fool. I looked at her, not knowing how to comfort her, because I understood that for someone as proud as her, being compared in front of friends was more painful than losing money. She recounted that while everyone was fawning over Mrs. Mai, a woman in the village suddenly smirked and said, "If Misla would just have some work done, she'd look better. Leaving herself like this really drags down her appearance." That one sentence alone made her face flush bright red. She repeated every word, lips pressed tight, her hands twisted together. She said it in front of the whole village. She acted as if I were washed up, just sitting there for people to pity. I said softly, "Mom, please don't take such words to heart. People often just say things for fun." She snapped her head toward me. "Say it for fun, but stab someone in the face like that? You're still young, so you don't understand. At my age, just having people look at you with eyes that judge you as old is humiliating enough." I fell silent. There are things that, if said further, would only be wrong. Min Kang, sitting beside me, wasn't in a hurry to intervene either. He just watched his mother with a heavy gaze, as if trying to gauge how agitated she truly was. Ever since that party, my mother-in-law changed noticeably. Before, she only cared about makeup and clothes, but now she has become obsessed with her own body. One day, I came home late from delivering flowers. The moment I opened the door, I saw her standing in front of the large mirror in the living room, pulling her shirt up and down. She leaned back and forth as if inspecting every single flaw. Seeing me, she startled, let go of her shirt, and snapped, "Don't you know how to announce yourself when you walk in?" I quickly said, "I thought you were watching TV." She didn't answer, just glared at me and walked straight into her room. But from that day on, I noticed many strange things appearing on her vanity. Everything from firming creams and rejuvenating serums to shapewear and brochures for beauty clinics. Her phone no longer played those dance clips as before. Instead, it was filled with videos offering breast augmentation consultations for middle-aged women. The consultants' voices are always as sweet as honey. Women over 60 still have the right to be beautiful. Just a small change, and life will be different. Don't be stingy with yourself, because beauty is a kind of value. Those words kept repeating in our house until they became an obsession. One day while eating dinner, Ms. Myla suddenly put down her chopsticks and asked, "Van, do you think it's weird for a 61-year-old woman to get a breast lift?" I froze. Min Kang also looked up at his mother. I tried to choose my words carefully. If it were for health or medical reasons, I wouldn't say anything. But to get major cosmetic surgery at this age, I think you should consider it carefully. Mom. She gave a cold laugh and said, "Beating around the bush like that means you think it's weird, right?" Min Kang spoke up. "Mom, don't jump to conclusions. Van is just worried about your health." She slammed her chopsticks on the table. "You two are always using health as a threat. Tell the truth. You're just afraid I'll spend your money, aren't you?" I felt a lump in my throat. A peaceful meal was turned into an interrogation, but I kept quiet because I didn't want to escalate things yet. A few days later, Ms. Mila called me into her room. On the bed, she had laid out a stack of price quotes, before and after photos of clients and a consultation schedule with red stamps. She sat up straight, looking as serious as if she were discussing a matter of life and death. She pushed the papers toward me and said clearly, "I've decided, I'm going to get a breast lift. The total cost is $250 million, you get the money ready for me." I was stunned. Even though I had a hunch this would happen, hearing it from her own mouth left my mind blank. $250 million is not a small amount. That is money, Min Kang, and I had to save for a very long time. I took a breath, trying to keep my voice calm. "Mom, this is a huge decision. At your age, that kind of surgery is very dangerous. I think we should go for a general checkup first, consult a real doctor before deciding." Ms. Miley's face immediately darkened. "I already asked, they said it can be done, don't try to scare me with my age." I looked at the papers in front of me. Words like rejuvenation, lasting beauty, painless, and no complications were printed in huge letters, while the risk warnings were so small that almost no one would notice them. I said slowly, "I'm not against you wanting to look beautiful, Mom, but I cannot agree to give $250 million for a surgery that I find far too risky." She stared at me, her gaze turning cold. "You don't want me to look beautiful, do you?" I was stunned for a few seconds. "What are you saying, Mom?" She gritted her teeth. "I know exactly what's going on. You're afraid of me looking better, afraid people will praise me and then criticize you. I know how women are, I'm not clueless." Hearing that, I realized clearly that any advice I gave would no longer reach her ears. In her mind right now, I was no longer the daughter-in-law worried about her mother-in-law. I had been turned into someone heartless, someone stingy, someone jealous of the rejuvenation she was dreaming of. And from that very moment, I understood one thing. My mother-in-law's obsession was no longer about looking in the mirror or listening to a few disparaging remarks. It had turned into a fire. One wrong word and this whole house would burn to the ground. That evening, our dinner was no longer a meal. It felt like a trial where my mother-in-law had taken the judge's seat, while I was dragged out as the defendant. On the table, the bowl of soup was still steaming. The dish of braised fish I had cooked since the afternoon had barely been touched. Min Kang had just come home from work, his shirt still smelling of the warehouse and cardboard dust. He hadn't even started eating when my mother-in-law slammed her phone onto the table. The screen was still open to the consultation messages from the beauty clinic. She looked at me, her voice icy. "I'll ask you one last time. Are you giving me the money or not?" I set my chopsticks down, trying to keep my voice calm. I said, "I've already told you, Mom, $250 million is a huge amount. If you needed medical treatment, I wouldn't hesitate, but this surgery is too dangerous, and I don't agree to it." Quote. My mother-in-law, Mila, let out a sneer. The sound was so dry and unpleasant that my spine stiffened. "You don't agree? Who do you think you are to disagree? The money in this house belongs to you too, but it is also my son's money. I gave birth to him and raised him. Now that I want a little help, you act like I'm robbing you." Min Kang looked up. "Mom, this isn't just a little thing." She whipped her head toward him. "You shut up, I am talking to your wife." I took a deep breath. Any other time, I might have just stayed silent, but not today. I knew that if I gave in, that money would be gone tomorrow, and my mother-in-law would be on an operating table, blinded by others pulling the strings. I said slowly, "If you want to get work done, I won't stop you, but I can't take our life savings and pour it into a surgery I don't believe is safe. I am honestly not worried about the money, I am worried about you." She slammed her hand on the table, the soup bowl wobbled, and a few drops splashed onto the tablecloth. "Worried about me, that sounds so nice. Are you worried about me or about losing money? Have I lived this long without understanding a daughter-in-law like you?" I looked at her, my throat tightening. "Mom, please don't say that. All these years, have I ever denied you anything necessary? Whether it's necessary or not is for me to decide. It's not your place to lecture me." Her voice began to rise, her carefully made-up face turned bright red, and her eyes flashed with anger. She stood up abruptly, pointing straight at my face. You think you're something special just because you opened a tiny flower shop? Without this house and without King, you wouldn't even be able to stand in this city, would you? That sentence felt like a needle stabbing straight into my self-esteem. That flower shop was built by my own hands. I rented the space myself. I stayed up late, got up early, and went to get flowers at 3 or 4 in the morning. Yet, through her words, all my hard work was reduced to me just sponging off my husband's family. I looked up at her. You can say whatever you want, but don't deny my hard work. I contributed every cent of that money. I cannot let it be used blindly. The moment I uttered the word blindly, I knew I had pushed the trigger. Mila lunged at me so fast I couldn't even step back. A crisp, sharp slap echoed through the dining room. My cheek burned, my head jerked to the side, and my ears rang for seconds. The whole house went dead silent. I held my cheek, staring at her in shock. Though she had scolded, cursed, and spoken harshly to me before, I never imagined she would slap me right in front of my husband. She gritted her teeth, her voice trembling with rage. How dare you be stingy with me? Every word felt like a blade hitting the table. My eyes stung, but before I could speak, she pointed a finger at my face. A daughter-in-law like you needs to be taught a lesson. Just because you have a little money, you think you own this house. Let me tell you, as long as I'm alive, don't you ever think you'll walk all over me. I stood frozen, my cheek burning, but the pain in my heart was far more searing. I looked over at Min Kang. In that moment, I didn't expect him to do anything grand, just to say one fair word. And then, the unexpected happened. Min Kang slammed his chopsticks down on the table, not just set them down, but slammed them. That sound made my mother-in-law freeze. He stood up and pulled me behind his back. His expression was so cold that I barely recognized him. He looked straight at his mother, his words low but heavy. If you lay a hand on my wife again, I will sell this house and move out immediately. Mila was stunned. Perhaps in her entire life, she never thought her son would dare say that to her. She opened her mouth, but for the first few seconds, she couldn't utter a word. Then she stammered, You're threatening your mother for this woman? Min Kang didn't blink. I'm not threatening you, I'm telling the truth. The atmosphere in the room felt heavy, as if crushed by stones. I stood behind my husband, hand still on my cheek, my heart pounding rapidly. This was the first time in nearly 10 years of marriage that I saw Min Kang stand up for me so clearly. Mila was so angry her lips trembled. I gave birth to you, I raised you. Now that I just want to look a little better, you treat me like a madwoman. Min Kang clenched his fists, his voice growing even colder. The one who needs to wake up isn't my wife, but you, mother. The statement struck the dining table like a blade, cutting off Mrs. Miley's screaming. She stood frozen, her face turning pale then red, her eyes filled with both indignation and shock. As for me, watching my husband's back, I felt pained, bewildered, and something else, a strange sensation. I realized Min Kang wasn't just defending his wife. He was afraid of something he perhaps had already known for a while. He just hadn't gotten around to telling me yet. After Min Kang's words, the dining room fell into a long, heavy silence. Mrs. Mila stood stunned by the table, her hands still trembling with rage, while I stood behind my husband, my cheek burning as if pressed against hot coals. But what made it harder to breathe wasn't the slap, but the feeling that everything in this house had just cracked deeply. My mother-in-law looked at Min Kang as if he were a complete stranger. Say that again, you're planning to sell the house and move out because of this woman? Min Kang didn't raise his voice, but every word was crystal clear. It's not because of Van, it's because you've crossed the line. Mrs. Mila sneered, but her smile was twisted. Cross the line? So what if I slapped her? A daughter-in-law who talks back to her mother-in-law. If I don't teach her, are you going to let her walk all over us? I saw Min Kang take a deep breath. He didn't answer immediately. Perhaps he was also trying to hold on to his last shred of composure. Then he turned to me, looked at the red mark on my cheek, and his eyes sank. It wasn't a look of pity, but the look of someone finally blaming himself for staying silent for too long. He said to his mother, You think hitting my wife is teaching her, but to me, it's an insult. You slapped her in front of me, which means you don't respect me either. Mrs. Mila choked on her words. That statement seemed to pierce something she hadn't expected. She was used to treating me as an outsider, used to thinking my endurance was a given, but she never imagined Min Kang would see that slap as a slap to his own face. I pulled my husband's sleeve gently. Enough, let me go to our room first. I didn't want the meal to turn into a battlefield right then, but Min Kang held my hand, very gently, yet it meant he wouldn't let me swallow it alone this time. He turned to his mother, his voice still low. From today on, the household finances must be transparent. If you want to do anything big, you must discuss it with us first. There will be no more forcing Van to give money, and certainly no more physical abuse. Mrs. Milo was so angry she pointed her finger at him. She's bewitched you. Ever since you married her, you've become more and more insolent. Quote, Min Kang looked at his mother for a long time before saying something that made me freeze. I didn't change just from marrying Van. I changed the day I realized you were being led around by the nose. Mrs. Milo was stunned. Who is leading me around? He didn't answer right away. He just cleared the dishes from the table and turned to me. Van, go to the room. I'll ice your face. His voice was calm but very firm. I knew he didn't want to say everything in front of his mother. Mrs. Milo stood there huffing and puffing, muttering words about her unfilial son. But this time, Min Kang didn't turn back to soothe her as he usually did. In the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed as he took a towel-wrapped ice pack and placed it gently against my cheek. The cold touching my skin made me wince, and I instinctively pulled back. He stopped his hand, his voice softening. Does it hurt a lot? I smiled bitterly. What do you think? He remained silent for a long time before saying, I'm sorry, just 3 words, but they made my nose sting. It wasn't because I was waiting for an apology for his mother's slap, but because for all these years, I had been waiting for him to see the much smaller hurts. The sarcastic remarks, the times his mother looked down on me, the meals I had to swallow in choking silence. I asked, you reacted like that today, not just because your mother slapped me, right? Min Kang stopped his hand, his eyes darkening. He placed the ice pack on a small plate on the table and sat down next to me. The room was so quiet I could clearly hear the ticking of the clock in the hallway. He said, I suspect Mrs. Tuyat Mai has an agenda. I turned completely to look at him. What do you mean? He rubbed his hands together as if weighing every word. Last week, I was delivering goods for someone in the warehouse at the shopping center. When I went down to the parking garage, I saw Mom sitting in a cafe with Mrs. Mai and a man in a suit. At first, I thought they were just friends, but as I walked by, I heard them mentioning consumer loans, aesthetic installments, and some kind of guarantee paperwork. I felt a chill. Why didn't you tell me? I wasn't sure back then. I was afraid I might be misjudging her. But after paying more attention, I noticed others in Mom's group. Anyone who bragged about getting beauty treatments with Mrs. Mai ended up in financial trouble. I looked at my husband, my heart starting to race. What kind of trouble? Min Kang lowered his voice. There was a woman named Fuck who used to be close with Mom, but she suddenly disappeared from the group. I asked around through acquaintances and found out she had taken a loan for beauty work, then was coerced into paying all sorts of extra fees. Her husband couldn't take it and they separated. Others even had to sell land back home to pay off the debt. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The images of Mrs. Milo spending these past few days looking in the mirror and listening to consultations about getting a breast augmentation suddenly pieced together into a much more terrifying picture. Min Kang continued, I advised Mom to stay away from Mrs. Mai, but she wouldn't listen. Mom said I was just scaring her because I didn't want her to be beautiful, but I find the way Mrs. Mai talks to her very strange. It's not like friends advising each other, but like someone cornering prey. Quote, the word prey made me shudder. I looked toward the bedroom door, where my mother-in-law's voice was still muttering outside. The woman who just slapped me, called me stingy, and treated me like an outsider. Turns out, she might be the one being led step by step into a trap by someone else. I asked quietly, so what do we do now? Min Kang looked at me, his voice firmer. For now, keep all the important documents, savings books, house deeds, and bank accounts. Anything related to money must be locked down. I'm afraid Mom might get worked up and sign something she shouldn't. I nodded, but my heart remained heavy because I understood that with my mother-in-law's personality, the more she is stopped, the more she will want to prove she is right. And if there is truly someone setting a trap behind the scenes, they surely won't easily let go of the prey that has just taken the bait. I barely slept that night. My cheek was still throbbing, but Min Kang's words kept echoing in my mind, like someone cornering their prey. I knew from that moment, this was no longer just about my mother-in-law wanting breast surgery. It could be a trap, and my whole family was standing right at the edge of the pit. The next morning, my mother-in-law's attitude changed so quickly I thought I was seeing things. She didn't mention the slap from last night, nor did she bring up the 250 million again. When I went to the kitchen, she was at the table with a basket of peeled oranges, her voice unusually gentle. "Van, have an orange, they're very sweet." I looked at the plate of oranges, then at her. Someone like her, if she truly realized her mistake, would stay silent for a long time, not turn sweet so suddenly. That sudden kindness didn't reassure me. Instead, it sent a chill down my spine. Min Kang noticed it too. He just gave me a quick glance, his eyes warning me to be careful. The whole morning, Mrs. Myla didn't cause any trouble at all. She even went out of her way to wipe the table and set the dishes, speaking very politely, but that only made me feel more suspicious. Someone who slapped me over money last night, screaming that I was stingy, how could she act like nothing happened after just one night? Near noon, I went to the flower shop. Just as I opened the shop, Min Kang sent me a very short text. "I've locked the banking app. I put the documents in the small safe. Don't give the code to anyone." I read the message, my heart sinking heavily. It turned out he didn't trust his mother's silence either. Around 3 p.m., while wrapping flowers for a customer, I realized I'd left my secondary phone at home. I use that device to receive online orders. Without it, processing orders tonight would be very inconvenient. I quickly asked the shop assistant to watch the store and rode back home. The front gate was left ajar. There was no TV noise in the yard like usual. I stepped softly into the house, planning to head upstairs to grab the phone and leave immediately. But as I passed my mother-in-law's room, I heard her whispering very quietly. The door was slightly ajar, and from inside, the voice of another woman came through a video call. It was Ms. Tuyat Mai. I stopped in my tracks. Ms. Mai laughed very sweetly. "Just sign the documents, I'll take care of the rest. The men in the house won't know. We women have to make these decisions ourselves. If you keep asking your children and daughter-in-law, when will you ever get to look beautiful?" My mother-in-law lowered her voice. "But Van keeps a tight grip on the money. Kang was also firm yesterday. I probably have to try another way." Hearing that, my hands turned ice cold. So the silence this morning wasn't because she had reconsidered. She was just changing her tactics. If she couldn't get money from me, she would find another path. Ms. Mai continued, her voice both persuasive and reassuring. "Don't worry, my side has support. No need to withdraw money immediately. No need to tell anyone. Just put your name down and you'll be beautiful later. When your son sees his mother young and beautiful, he won't have the heart to blame you." My mother-in-law was silent for a few seconds, then asked, "Are you sure there won't be any trouble?" "Oh my God, just trust me. So many people have done it. Just think, how many times in a woman's life do you get to live for yourself? If you hesitate, those ladies from the other day will laugh behind your back again." Quote, just that one mention of being laughed at behind her back, and I could hear my mother-in-law breathing harder. I realized she had been hit in her most sensitive spot. Fear of being ugly might not make her take risks, but the fear of being mocked certainly would. I didn't dare stand there for long. I quietly stepped back, went to the room to get my phone, and left the house as if I hadn't heard anything. Reaching the end of the alley, I called Min Kang immediately. He listened in silence for a long time before saying, "I knew Mom wouldn't give up." I asked, "What do we do now?" He replied slowly, "Just let's see what tricks they're planning to pull. But from now on, record everything, don't confront them yet." That afternoon, my mother-in-law sent a message to the family group chat, saying she wanted to host her 61st birthday party at a restaurant this weekend. She said this year is a milestone age, and she wants to have a proper party to change her luck. It sounded normal, but I knew that behind this story, things were not simple. She even listed the guests, which included almost her entire group of beauty-obsessed friends, especially Mrs. Tuyat Mai. The restaurant she chose was quite upscale, and the cost was certainly not low. Min Kang finished reading and frowned. Mom is trying to prove to her friends that she still has money and status. I said softly, "Should we decline?" He shook his head. "Declining now will just make her say we're holding her back. Let's just go. I want to see what Mrs. Mai is planning to do at that party." On Saturday night, the restaurant was ablaze with lights. Mrs. Myla appeared in a turquoise dress, wearing a large pearl necklace, her hair curled high, and makeup so heavy it looked somewhat unnatural. She walked among her friends, laughing and talking loudly as if she wanted everyone to notice her. I sat next to Min Kang, quietly observing. Mrs. Tuyat Mai arrived a little later. As soon as she walked in, she became the center of attention in a tight red dress, strong perfume, and a shrill laugh. She hugged my mother-in-law and said loudly, "La, you look so beautiful today. Just a little more work and you'll look 10 years younger." My mother-in-law laughed, but I clearly saw her eyes light up. It wasn't ordinary joy, it was the look of someone being fed exactly what they were dying to hear. During the meal, Mrs. Myla began to make pointed and direct remarks. She said that for older people, wanting to do something for themselves is often difficult because their children are always counting the costs. One of the friends turned to look at me. Daughter-in-laws these days are strange, aren't they? Does a mother-in-law need permission just to look beautiful? Before I could answer, Min Kang set his glass down. Beauty treatments don't require permission, but when it comes to borrowing money, signing forms, surgery, and risks, level-headed people need to sit down together. Mrs. Tuyat Mai heard this and gave a light laugh. Kang says that because he cares for his mother, but sometimes men don't understand. It's sad for older women not to do anything for themselves. Then she stood up, deliberately adjusting her dress, and spoke as if she were sharing a casual story. Take me, for example. I became much more confident after I had it done. A successful man even told me that if I were single, he'd be willing to give me an apartment just to pursue me. The whole table erupted. The women gasped in admiration, while my mother-in-law sat silently, her hand tightened around the glass. I could see all the jealousy, the impatience, and the craving for validation swirling in her eyes. But just as the party seemed ready to become a tribute to her, a loud noise erupted from the entrance. A middle-aged woman in a worn coat rushed in, grabbed a glass of water from a nearby table, and splashed it right in Tuyat Mai's face. The whole restaurant went silent. The woman shook with rage, pointed straight at Mai and shouted, "You vixen who tricks women into taking out loans, today I'm going to unmask you in front of everyone." Tuyat Mai stood stunned, her makeup smearing down her face. My mother-in-law jumped up, while Min Kang immediately grabbed my hand and pulled me back. In that chaotic moment, I understood one thing very clearly. The trap that Min Kang suspected was finally beginning to show, but what lay ahead was surely far worse. The entire restaurant turned into chaos in seconds. The sound of chairs scraping, panicked questions, phones being pulled out to record, mixed with staff rushing in to intervene. Tuyat Mai stood frozen in the aisle, her carefully curled hair flattened on one side by the water. The streaks of foundation running down her cheeks looked both pathetic and terrifying. The woman who had splashed her was still trembling, her eyes bloodshot as if she'd been holding back hatred for a long time. My mother-in-law was the first to react. She slammed her hand on the table. "Enough. Who let this kind of street trash in here to ruin my party?" The woman turned sharply toward Myla and let out a dry laugh. "Ruin your party? Do you still think you're attending such a fancy party? You're sitting at the same table as her bait." That remark left the whole table in stunned silence. Myla was red with anger. "Watch your tongue, I don't know you." "You don't know me, but you certainly know Tuyat Mai, don't you?" The woman pointed directly at Mai. Her voice was hoarse, but every word was crystal clear. "My name is Hong Fuck, 54 years old. A year ago, this woman tricked me into getting a breast lift, promising I'd look younger, my husband would fall for me again, and friends would respect me. Initially, they said it was only over 100 million, but once I signed and was on the table, they forced me to upgrade the package and take out more loans, ending up with nearly 400 million in debt." The people around started whispering. Someone murmured, "Is that for real?" Someone raised their phone to get a closer shot. After a few seconds of panic, Mrs. Tuyat Mai regained her composure, wiped the moisture from her chin, and gave a cold smile. "Fuck, that's enough out of you. Are you blaming me just because you didn't turn out looking good? I only recommended a reputable place. You signed the papers and agreed to it yourself. No one forced you, did they?" Fuck let out a laugh, a sound so bitter it sent chills down my spine. She pulled her collar down slightly to reveal a distorted scar across her chest. Even just a glimpse was enough to make the women sitting nearby turn away in horror. Choking back tears, she said, "Is this your reputable place? Look at me, I lost my money, my figure, and my husband. My own daughter doesn't even dare to look at me, yet you're still out here in your red dress, luring in more victims." Quote, Mrs. Tuyatmai snapped back immediately. Stop putting on this pitiful act here. If you have a bad constitution, just accept it. Don't go slandering people. Min Kang stood next to me, his hand gripping my wrist very tightly. He leaned down and whispered, do you see now? I wasn't wrong to be suspicious. Quote, I didn't respond. My eyes remained fixed on the man in the black suit sitting at the VIP table on the other side. When Fuck mentioned the loans, he immediately stood up, adjusted his jacket, and quietly headed outside. No one noticed him but me, but what chilled me was that before he left, Mrs. Tuyatmai cast a quick glance his way, her eyes filled with an unconcealable panic. Mrs. Myla still refused to back down. Perhaps out of embarrassment before her friends, she couldn't accept being warned right there during her birthday party. She pointed a finger at Fuck, saying you ruined your own life, so deal with it. Don't get jealous and cause a scene just because others are prettier and classier. Fuck looked at her with a gaze that was both angry and pitiful. You think I'm jealous of you? You're about to become the next prey. They flatter you a bit, poke fun at your age a bit, and just like that, you stick your own neck into the noose. You don't even know how much you're being sold for. That sentence was like an invisible slap straight to my mother-in-law's face. Mrs. Myla trembled with anger, striding straight toward Fuck. Shut your mouth, what do you know? Min Kang immediately stepped in front of his mother. Mom, that's enough. She turned and shouted at him. Move aside. Today I have to teach her what it means to speak nonsense. Min Kang held her hand, his voice deepening. The person who needs to listen today is you, Mom, not her. The atmosphere in the restaurant was tense as a bowstring. Taking advantage of everyone's attention on Fuck, Mrs. Tuyatmai inched toward the door, but Fuck wouldn't let her escape. She stepped forward and pointed at Mrs. Mai. Tell me, how much percentage do you get per client? I signed a 400 million package, how much did you get? 20 million, 30 million, or even more? Mrs. Mai went pale. You're crazy. Where is the staff? Call security to throw this person out. But the louder she yelled, the more guilty she appeared. The restaurant security ran over, but Min Kang raised his hand to stop them. Wait, this concerns my mother, let her finish. Mrs. Myla turned to look at her son, eyes wide. Are you taking an outsider's side to humiliate your own mother? Min Kang replied very coldly. If an outsider is right, I have to listen. If you are wrong, I must stop you before it's too late. I looked at my husband, an indescribable feeling rising in my heart. He didn't defend me noisily, nor did he scold his mother to appease the crowd, but every word he spoke hit the mark, making my mother-in-law unable to continue acting out, no matter how angry she was. Fuck suddenly turned to me, her gaze resting on the faint swelling on my cheek. Perhaps the makeup didn't cover it entirely. She looked at me for a few seconds then spoke softly, but loud enough for me to hear. You're her daughter-in-law, right? If you can still save her, do it, don't let her sign anything. Once it's signed, it's not just money you'll lose. Before I could ask anything more, Mrs. Tuyatmai broke free from the crowd and dashed toward the back door. Min Kang intended to chase after her, but I pulled his arm back. I looked toward the VIP table, where the man in the suit had pushed back his chair, then watched the matchmaker's figure disappear down the hall. I whispered, don't chase her. The more we rush, the more likely we'll lose her. At least today, we know one thing for sure, she isn't acting alone. My mother-in-law's birthday party ended in total chaos. The guests left, whispering all sorts of rumors. Ms. Myla collapsed into her chair, her face a mix of shame and anger, but I still saw no signs of realization in her eyes. I only saw the bitterness of being humiliated. And that is exactly what's so terrifying, because if a victim still thinks they're just being insulted, they'll be led even further astray by the deceiver. After that birthday party, I thought my mother-in-law would at least feel some fear. A stranger had stormed into the restaurant, pointing directly at Tuyatmai, accusing her of tricking women into taking out loans for beauty procedures, even revealing a gruesome complication scar. Any sane person would have stopped, sat down, and wondered why everything felt like such a coincidence. But not Ms. Myla. On the way home, she sat in the back seat, her face as cold as stone. Min Kang and I didn't say a word. As the car passed through rows of lit streets, the air inside was so heavy I could clearly hear the steady hum of the air conditioner. As soon as we arrived home, she stepped out forcefully, slammed the door, and turned back to glare at us. Are you two satisfied now? My birthday was ruined, You must be feeling pretty smug right now. Min Kang said wearily, Mom, that person came to warn you, can't you see that? She gave a scoffing, warning laugh. She's just a failed woman who's jealous of others, and you two are just using this story to stop me. Let me tell you, the more I'm looked down upon, the more I need to be beautiful. I have to make those people laughing behind my back open their eyes. With that, she walked straight into her room and locked the door. The sound of the latch clicking in the night felt very cold. I looked at Min Kang and saw his face darken. He wasn't feeling explosive anger anymore. The worry in his eyes was clearer than ever before. Around midnight, I walked past her room and heard her talking on the phone. Her voice was low, but in the quiet house, every word drifted out. Yeah, I understand, but is signing like that really secure? No, we can't let Kang find out, and don't even talk about Van, she guards money like her own life. I froze, my heart pounding hard. Min Kang stepped up from behind and placed a hand on my shoulder, signaling for silence. We stood outside the door listening for a few more seconds, a woman's voice echoing from the phone speaker. Even without hearing every word, I still recognized it was Tuyat Mai. She spoke very sweetly. Just trust me, we're just signing to hold the spot, no one loses anything. If a woman waits for her children's permission, she'll never get anything done, even when she's much older. My mother-in-law replied in an even lower voice. I can go tomorrow morning, but don't call the house number, just call my personal phone. Min Kang gritted his teeth and pulled me into the bedroom. He whispered, What is Mom planning to sign? I asked, Should we stop her now? He shook his head, his eyes turning cold. If we stop her now, she'll deny it. We must know where she's going, who she's meeting, and what she's signing. The next morning, Mrs. Mila pretended to have a headache and said she wanted to see a doctor. She wore a very modest outfit, quite different from her usual flashy style. Before leaving, she glanced at me and said, I'm going to the hospital today, no one needs to take me. I'm not so old that I need someone to supervise me everywhere. Min Kang did not respond. After waiting a few minutes for her to leave the gate, he grabbed his motorbike keys. I'm following Mom, you stay home, I'll call if anything happens. I held his hand. Be careful, don't let Mom discover you. He nodded and left. I stayed at home, feeling like I was burning with anxiety. Every few minutes, I checked my phone. Nearly an hour later, Min Kang sent me a photo taken from a distance. In the photo, my mother-in-law was entering a gray office building, accompanied by the man in the black suit who had left the birthday party earlier. His next message was just a few words, It's him. I held the phone, my hands turning ice cold. A moment later, Min Kang called, his voice very low. His name is Sao Dung, claiming to be a financial advisor. I'm at the cafe across the street, Mom just went to the 3rd floor. I asked Z, have you heard anything? Not yet, but I just saw Ms. Mai arrive too. Just hearing that, I understood that everything was no longer just suspicion. Ms. Tuyat Mai isn't just going with my mother-in-law as a friend, she is leading her into a setup. About an hour later, Min Kang sent another short video clip. The image is a bit shaky because he filmed it from afar, but you can clearly see my mother-in-law sitting at a desk. Sao Dung placed a thick stack of papers in front of her, while Ms. Tuyat Mai sat beside her, constantly whispering into her ear. By the afternoon, Ms. Mila returned home with a triumphant look on her face. She didn't look like someone who had just come from a medical checkup. She put her bag down and looked at me with a smirk. Without you, I can still get things done. Don't think that holding on to the money means you're holding on to me. I looked at her. Did you go for a checkup or to sign papers? Her smile froze for a moment, but she quickly regained her defiant attitude. Are you stalking me? Just then, Min Kang walked in from outside. He placed his phone on the table and played the secretly recorded video. Ms. Miley's face changed color instantly. He asked every word, What did you just sign? She looked at the screen, her lips trembling, but she still tried to deny it. I only signed advisory papers, what's the big deal? Min Kang's voice was cold. Advisory papers that require copies of your ID, household registry, and property deeds? Advisory that requires sitting down with a loan shark? Ms. Mila turned pale but still stubbornly persisted. I'm borrowing my own money, in my own name, it has nothing to do with you two. My heart sank as I heard that. Mom, where did that money go? She turned to me, her eyes filled with resentment. Where I transfer it is my business. I won't ask you for anything anymore. In this life, I will not let a daughter-in-law walk all over me. At that very moment, her phone rang with a message notification. The screen lit up on the table. She rushed to grab it, but Min Kang was faster. He picked up the phone, looked at the message, and his face darkened. I stepped forward. The screen clearly displayed a notification for a 250 million loan disbursement. But what made my blood run cold was that the money didn't go into my mother-in-law's account at all. It was transferred directly to an account held by a beauty clinic. Min Kang gripped the phone tightly, his voice hoarse. Mom really signed for the loan. Mrs. Myla froze for a few seconds, then snatched the phone back. She snapped. So what? I'm using the money I borrowed to improve my looks. You two don't need to lecture me. Quote, Min Kang looked at his mother, his eyes filled with both anger and pain. Do you think that's your money? From the moment you signed, they've had you by the throat. But she didn't listen. She clutched her handbag tightly, her face flushed with pride. I don't need anyone to save me. I decide my own life. I stood next to my husband, watching the 61-year-old woman who still thought she was reclaiming her life, unaware that a single signature had just dragged our entire family deeper into a trap. That evening, our house felt as if a storm had just passed through, but no one was willing to clean up the wreckage. My mother-in-law clutched her phone and walked straight into her room, slamming the door shut. Min Kang stood in the middle of the living room with a face like stone, while I kept seeing the disbursement text message in my head, my heart growing colder by the second. 250 million, an incredibly large sum for our family. What was even more terrifying was that the money didn't pass through my mother-in-law's hands for even a second. It was transferred straight to the beauty clinic's account. As if everything had been planned from the start. The borrower is just the one carrying the debt, while the money went into someone else's pocket the moment the signature was placed. Min Kang sat down on the chair, rubbing his face vigorously with both hands. Mom has been scammed. I looked toward Mrs. Miley's bedroom door and said softly, the problem is she doesn't think she was scammed, she thinks she's winning. He looked up at me, his eyes full of exhaustion and pain. He said he would talk to his mother again. I held his hand to stop him. Not right now, Mom is too sensitive. Whatever you say, she will think she's being forced. Wait until she's calmer. But I had underestimated my mother-in-law's stubbornness. Just about 10 minutes later, her door swung open. She walked out, her eyes red, phone in hand. I don't know who she just called, but her expression now looked as if she had been fueled with new resolve. She pointed straight at me. Are you satisfied now? You've made Kang look at me like a fool. I've signed it now, and the money has been transferred too. What else do you intend to do to me? I stood up, trying to stay calm. I'm not doing anything to you, Mom. I just want you to cancel the appointment, stop the service, and review the loan contract. She sneered, Hoy, are you trying to lose all the money? Do you think I'm that stupid? They said if I cancel midway, I'll lose the booking fee, filing fee, and consultation fee. I've come this far, so I have to finish it. Min Kang stepped forward. Mom, listen to me, they are cornering you with these terms. The further you go, the deeper you'll get trapped. Mrs. Myla turned sharply toward him. Trapped in what? I'm borrowing money to pay for it, I'm beautifying myself. If you won't help, then don't stand there cursing me. I felt a tightness in my chest listening to her. It was clear we were trying to pull her out of the pit, but in her eyes, we were the ones pushing her down. I spoke slowly, Mom, if they were a legitimate business, why wasn't the money transferred to your account? Why is the loan contract bundled with the cosmetic contract? Why does Mrs. Mai keep pushing you to sign so quickly? The last question made her falter for a moment, but she quickly regained her defiant look. Quote, because Mrs. Mai understands me, while you only know how to hoard money. No sooner had she finished speaking than she lunged at me. I saw her hand go up, and the sting of the previous slap still lingering on my cheek made me instinctively step back. But this time, that hand didn't manage to touch my face. Min Kang blocked his mother's hand in midair. He gripped her wrist, not hard enough to hurt her, but enough that she couldn't pull away. His voice dropped, every word heavy as stone. Mom, I'll say this one last time. If you hit my wife again, I'm taking her out of this house tonight. Mrs. Myla froze, her lips trembling. You dare to hold your mother's hand because of her. Min Kang let go of her hand, but his gaze did not soften. I held your hand because I don't want you to make any more mistakes. She looked at him in disbelief, then suddenly plopped down onto the chair and buried her face in her hands, sobbing. But that crying didn't sound like someone who realized they were wrong. It sounded like someone trying to drag everyone else into their own wrongdoing. She cried while calling each of our relatives one by one. Her voice was broken, intentionally loud. Sister, I'm so miserable. My daughter-in-law keeps all the money and won't let me get medical treatment. Kang now listens to his wife and treats his mother like an outsider. I stood there stunned. Medical treatment? She had turned a breast augmentation into a medical treatment in a single sentence. Less than half an hour later, Min Kang's phone rang incessantly. Aunt Ba, Uncle Tu, Aunt Han, Uncle Kwan. Everyone who called only listened to one side of the story. Some even started scolding him the moment they picked up. Kang, a man who lets his wife walk all over him, is a failure. Whatever your mother wants to do to feel better, just let her do it. Why stop her? Min Kang tried to explain a few times, then fell silent, because he understood that no one really wanted the truth. They just wanted to side with whoever cried the loudest. I went to the kitchen to pour a glass of water, my hands trembling slightly, not from the scolding, but because I clearly saw that Mrs. Milo was ready to paint me as the villain to save her own face. A person who has reached that point is capable of doing many unpredictable things. Nearly 9 p.m., my phone vibrated. An unknown number sent a message. Initially, I planned to ignore it, but the photo on the screen sent a chill down my spine. In the photo, Mrs. Milo was sitting in a consultation room, next to Sao Dung and Mrs. Tuyat Mai. On the table was a thick file, and in the corner of the photo, a small sign revealed the name of a spa located in an alley in the next district. A second message arrived right after. If you want to save your mother-in-law, come to this address before 9 p.m. tomorrow. Any later and she'll be on the operating table. I grabbed my phone and ran to the living room to show Min Kang. After reading it, his face immediately turned pale. Who sent it? I shook my head. An unknown number, but this person knows Mom is about to have surgery. My mother-in-law sat on the chair, still sulking. When she heard us mention the words spa and operating table, she immediately turned her face away. Don't you two put on an act, I don't believe it. Min Kang looked at his mother, his voice turning cold. Whether you believe me or not is up to you, but if you sneak out again tomorrow, I'm calling the police. Mrs. Mila turned pale but tried to remain defiant. Are you threatening me? He replied, No, I am saving you for the last time. That night, Min Kang and I followed the address from the message. It wasn't a luxury beauty clinic as my mother-in-law imagined, but a small spa hidden deep in a quiet alley. The sign was half lit. The glass door had a "We're open" sign, casting only a pale yellow light from within. As soon as we stopped the car at the alley, a young girl in a black jacket stepped out from the shadows. She looked around quickly and whispered, Are you Ton Van? I was on guard. Who are you? The girl swallowed hard, her voice noticeably trembling. My name is Tui Dung. I used to work as a receptionist there. I sent the message. Min Kang immediately asked, Is my mother in danger, right? Dung looked at the spa, her face ghostly white. If you don't stop her, she will be brought in here tomorrow. It's not a hospital, it's not a qualified facility, and they won't just take 250 million. I felt as if my heart was being squeezed. Dung opened her bag and pulled out a stack of crumpled photocopied documents, handing them to me. I managed to keep this copy. They intended to have her sign a few more papers. By then, it wouldn't just be the surgery money, they would be targeting your family's assets. Min Kang snatched the papers, his eyes turning red with anger. I stared at the spa in front of me, suddenly feeling that the small place looked like the mouth of a beast gaping in the dark, and my mother-in-law, no matter how stubborn she is being pushed step by step into it. I took the documents from Tui Dung's hand, my palms ice cold. The girl was very young, her face pale, her eyes constantly looking toward the spa, as if afraid someone would suddenly rush out. Under the yellow streetlights, I could clearly see her hand trembling as she pointed at each page. Dung whispered, I worked there for over 4 months. At first, I thought it was just a normal beauty spa, calling to remind clients of appointments, consulting, and printing files, but the further I went, the more something felt wrong. The clients were all women over 50 or 60, and everyone was told the exact same thing. You're still beautiful, just one step away from rejuvenation. Min Kang gripped the stack of papers tightly. What did they do? My mother, Deng swallowed hard, hasn't had the procedure yet, but they've already put her on the priority list. Tomorrow, they plan to bring her here for a cursory pre-op checkup and get her to sign more papers. I frowned. Why would it be done at a spa in an alley? My mother thought she was going to a large cosmetic clinic. Deng gave a bitter laugh. That's just what they tell the clients. They do consultations in nice offices and use images from big facilities. But for difficult cases, older clients, or those taking out loans, they're often pushed to more discreet locations. If something goes wrong, they claim the client chose an outside service, unrelated to the main establishment. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It turned out the luxury and polish my mother-in-law saw was just a facade. Behind it was a dark, hidden room in a quiet alley, where they could push a 61-year-old woman onto an operating table with sweet talk and a stack of loan papers. Deng opened another photocopy and pointed to the terms section. This is a 250 million dong loan contract already disbursed directly to the service provider, but if the client wants to cancel, they still have to pay the full principal, interest, file fees, and reservation fees. And here, she flipped to another page. Min Kang's expression changed the moment he looked at it. What is this? Deng replied. An extended post-op care package for another 120 million. They usually don't bring it up at the start. They wait until the client is ready for the procedure, then say that due to their age, they must purchase this package, or they'll be responsible for any complications themselves. I looked at the tiny, dense print, and my heart tightened. So that means even though my mother hasn't had the surgery yet, they still have a way to force her to sign more? Yes, and they usually have the clients drink something they claim will help them relax. I'm not sure what's in it, but many elderly people become dazed after drinking it and agree to anything they are asked. Min Kang punched the wall next to him hard. The sharp thud echoed in the empty alley, making me jump. My mom is foolish, but I won't let them kill her for money. I quickly grabbed Kang's arm to calm him down. We need to do this right. He breathed heavily, his eyes turning red. I understand how he feels. On one side is a mother who is stubbornly unreasonable. She slapped his wife and slandered me in front of our relatives. But on the other hand, she is still his mother. If she really gets put on the operating table while not in her right mind, he will carry that regret for the rest of his life. Deng looked at us, her voice dropping. I know one more thing. They are planning to have Ms. Myla sign a guarantee using the house as collateral. I heard Deng say that if she can't afford to pay more, they'll just take the house as a fallback. I was stunned. That house was left behind by Kang's father. Min Kang gritted his teeth. Mom has never touched those house papers. How do they know? Deng shook her head. I'm not sure, but the file contains photos of her household registry, ID, and even copies of the property deed. She might have given them when she signed the loan. I closed my eyes for a few seconds. Everything is spiraling faster than I thought. It started as a vanity trip for breast augmentation that became a 250 million loan, now a 120 million package, property guarantees, sedatives, and an underground spa. Every step is a hook pulling the prey deeper. Min Kang pulled out his phone. He was going to call the police right away. Deng Hoang frantically stopped him. It's not enough yet. They will claim I'm lying and say the client did it voluntarily. If you want to catch them red-handed, you have to wait until they force her to sign the next papers. But you two must have witnesses ready. I looked at Deng. Why are you helping us? Aren't you afraid of them? Deng bowed her head. A moment later she said, my mom was scammed this way too, but elsewhere. She borrowed money for beauty treatments, then fell into deep debt. My dad left, and I took this job because I needed money, but the longer I work here, the more I feel like an accomplice. Yesterday I saw your mom's file, and I was afraid she would become a second version of my mom. That statement left me speechless. Some people make mistakes out of greed, but others are trapped by poverty, fear, and not knowing how to get out. I looked at the young woman before me, suddenly feeling that in that dark night, there was still a glimmer of light. I told Min Kang, we should call a lawyer first, then get someone with expertise, even a reporter if needed. Tomorrow night, we don't just save Mom, we must secure evidence so they can't deny it. Min Kang nodded and immediately called an old friend who was a lawyer named Quoc Tin. Then he called Mr. Nam, a reporter who had worked on a series of articles about consumer fraud and predatory lending. I messaged Hong Fuck, the person who had splashed water on Tuyat Mai at the restaurant. Only 10 minutes later, Ms. Fuck replied, I'm in. This time, we have to make sure they have no way left to harm anyone. Quote, Dung explained carefully, tomorrow around 8 p.m., they would bring her there. Ms. Tuyat Mai and Mr. Dung would both be present. They would say it's to sign supplementary papers before the procedure. If you go in too early, they will hide everything. If you go in too late, she might have already taken the medicine. Hearing that, my heart pounded. That night, Min Kang and I couldn't sleep. We sat in the living room, spread every paper on the table, marked every clause, and photographed every page to send to the lawyer. Out there, my mother-in-law still believed she was about to undergo a rejuvenation, while we knew she was heading toward the edge of a cliff. The next morning, Mrs. Mila still acted as if nothing was wrong. She did her makeup carefully, tried on several dresses, and even asked me, look closely, in a few days I'll look completely different, don't you go getting jealous. I looked at her without arguing back. For the first time, I didn't feel as angry as before, I just felt pity. An elderly woman led by fake fears, only to have others turn those fears into a noose. I just replied gently, please be careful, Mom, not everyone who praises you genuinely wants what's best for you. Quote, she huffed coldly and turned away. As for me, I watched her back, silently praying that we would arrive in time tonight, because if we were just one step too slow, not only would the money and house be lost, but her very life might be put on the line. That evening, the clock hand had just ticked past 7:30. My mother-in-law had finished changing into the outfit she called her lucky clothes, a cream-colored silk dress, a thin shawl draped over her shoulders, hair neatly tied up, and lips painted red-orange. If one didn't know the truth behind it, anyone would probably think she was getting ready for some luxurious social gathering. Before leaving the house, she even looked at me with a defiant gaze. Stay home and wait, a woman who knows how to take care of herself never loses. I did not answer. Min Kang didn't stop her either. Only when the door closed did he turn to me, let's go. We didn't follow her immediately, but waited about 10 minutes to avoid being detected. Lawyer Kwok Tin, Nam the reporter, Hong Fuck, and Tui Dung were already waiting near the alley leading to the spa. Everyone understood that a slight slip-up would let those people hide all the documents and turn everything into a family misunderstanding. Around 7:50, we stood huddled under the eaves of a closed shop, from where we could see the entrance to the spa. Just as Dung said, a taxi stopped in front of the alley. My mother-in-law stepped out, followed by Ms. Tuyat Mai. Sao Dung was already waiting inside the glass door, smiling brightly, reaching out to assist Ms. Mila as if welcoming a guest of honor. Min Kang watched the scene, his hand clenching until his veins stood out. I placed my hand on his, whispering, wait for the right moment, don't let last night's hard work go to waste. Dung nodded slightly, they will take her to the back room first, they won't start signing papers for another 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt as long as an entire night. I could hear the cars on the street, dogs barking in the distance, and the thumping of my own heart in my chest. Inside the spa, yellow lights shone through the frosted glass, with silhouettes moving flickeringly back and forth, like a dirty play unfolding behind the curtain. At exactly 8:15, Dung received a message from an acquaintance inside saying they had served her relaxing tea and were preparing additional papers. She showed us the screen, her face pale. Min Kang could not wait any longer. He strode quickly toward the door. I, Lawyer Tin, Nam, and Hong Fuck followed him immediately. The outer glass door was unlocked, with only a young receptionist sitting at the counter. As soon as she saw Dung, she jumped up in surprise. Why are you here? Dung didn't answer. Min Kang walked straight into the inner hallway. The employee tried to block them, but Lawyer Tin raised his phone, recording. We are the client's family, do not obstruct us. The door to the inner room was ajar, and Sao Dung's voice echoed from inside. Sign here, Ms. La, and we're done. This package is mandatory. If you don't do the full post-op care, you risk the consequences yourself. We've come this far, don't skimp on a few bucks and ruin everything. My mother-in-law's voice was weaker than usual. But why another 120 million? At first, you didn't say that, Ms. Mai. Ms. Tuyat Mai smiled very softly. My dear, it's because we care about you that we remind you you're older and need careful attention. Just sign it, we'll worry about the payment later. As soon as those words were spoken, Min Kang kicked the door open. The door slammed against the wall with a bang, making everyone in the room jump. Before my eyes, my mother-in-law was sitting on a bed covered in white sheets, wearing a thin patient gown, looking dazed. On the table in front of her was a thick stack of papers, with a pen placed right next to her hand. Sao Dung stood by the table, while Ms. Tuyat Mai sat right next to my mother-in-law, her hand resting on her shoulder like a close friend. Min Kang lunged forward and snatched the stack of papers. Who gave you the right to force my mother to sign while she's not clear-headed? Sao Dung's expression changed instantly. What a strange thing to say. Your mother came here voluntarily. We provided proper consultation. I stepped forward to support Ms. Myla. Her body was limp, her eyes were open but not as alert as usual. She frowned at me. Why did you come here? I held her shoulders, trying to speak very slowly. I've come to take you home, mother. She still tried to push my hands away. I don't need it, it's all your fault. Everything is your fault. Hearing those words, my heart ached, but I didn't let go. No matter how unreasonable she was, I knew then that I couldn't let her stay in this room for another minute. Miss Tuyat Mai jumped up, her voice shrill. Van, stop playing the part of the good daughter-in-law. If your mother-in-law wants to look beautiful, let her. Your obstruction is nothing but unfilial. Hong Fuk walked in from behind. The moment she saw her, Mrs. Mai's face immediately stiffened. Fuk sneered, the same old trick, Ha Mai, calling it sisterly love before swindling people, then claiming it was voluntary once they're ruined. Sao Dung turned and shouted, who let you all in here? Get out, or I'll call security. Quote. Lawyer Tin calmly placed his business card on the table. Go ahead and call. We're already documenting how you feed elderly clients unknown substances before making them sign additional loan papers. Quote. Sao Dung froze. In that moment, Dung stepped forward and played a recording on her phone. Sao Dung's voice rang out clearly through the cold room. This woman is vain. Just threaten her reputation and she'll sign anything. Remember to give her the asset guarantee form last. Don't show it too early or she'll get scared. Quote. The atmosphere seemed to freeze. Mrs. Myla sat on the bed, her dull eyes suddenly widening. She looked at Sao Dung, then at Tuyat Mai. What asset guarantee form? No one answered. That very silence said it all. Nam, the reporter, raised his camera and said coldly, we have recorded everything. I ask everyone to keep all documents exactly where they are. Realizing the situation was turning against him, Sao Dung immediately backed toward the rear exit, but Min Kang stepped forward to block him. He looked at him, his voice terrifyingly low. You haven't swindled my mother enough? You're trying to drag my whole family into the mud? Quote. Sao Dung gritted his teeth. Don't lay a hand on me. Everything has a signature. Min Kang threw a stack of papers onto the table. Were those signed while they were clear-headed, or after you gave them that relaxing drink? That question made the employees in the room glance at each other, looking guilty. Mrs. Tuyat Mai still tried to struggle. Tell them, you did this voluntarily, right? I only wanted what was best for you. Quote. My mother-in-law turned to look at her. The confusion on her face began to be replaced by horror. Right at that moment, Dung placed another sheet of paper in front of Mrs. Myla. This is the commission breakdown I managed to photograph. For every successful loan, the referrer gets 20%. My mother-in-law trembled as she took the paper. Tuyat Mai's name appeared clearly in the referrer column, next to the commission amount from her 250 million loan. A few seconds later, Mrs. Myla braced herself and stood up. She was still unsteady, so I had to hold her up, but she brushed my hand away, walking step by step until she was in front of Mrs. Mai. Mrs. Tuyat Mai stammered, please listen to me explain. A loud slap echoed through the room. Mrs. Mylee's slap landed straight on Mrs. Mai's face, so hard that she stumbled to the side. My mother-in-law choked out, I treated you like a friend, while you treated me like a cash cow to milk. The whole room fell silent. Min Kang looked at his mother, his eyes full of pain and coldness. He said slowly, do you see it now, Mom? The person you trusted is selling you out, while the one you hid is trying to save you. Mrs. Myla stood stunned, her lipstick smeared, eyes reddening, and the hand that had just slapped Mrs. Mai hanging limply. For the first time since everything began, she didn't argue, didn't scold, and didn't blame me. She just sank into the chair by the bed, her shoulders shaking in the freezing surgical room. And I knew that slap didn't just land on Tuyat Mai's face, It struck the blind vanity my mother-in-law had been clinging to for so long. After that night at the spa in the alley, my mother-in-law was taken straight to a major hospital for a checkup. Getting into the car, she no longer had that arrogant air about her. She sat huddled in the backseat, arms clutching her shawl to her chest, eyes staring out the window but clearly seeing nothing. The entire way there, she didn't say a single word. At the hospital, the emergency doctor checked her blood pressure and heart rate, and asked what she had consumed earlier. Mrs. Mila fumbled, unable to recall clearly, only saying the spa staff gave her a sweet drink, telling her it would help her relax and make the consultation easier later. Hearing that, Min Kang's face instantly went pale. The doctor frowned. At your age, before any procedure, there must be a general examination and a full risk assessment. If you really took something with unknown ingredients and then signed papers or underwent invasive procedures, that would be extremely dangerous. My mother-in-law sat on the hospital bed, her lips trembling. So what if I had actually gone through with it? The doctor looked at her for a moment and then spoke plainly. I'm not trying to scare you, but if you have procedures under unsafe conditions while not fully conscious, a drug reaction, bleeding, infection, or cardiovascular complications could be life-threatening. That last sentence left Mrs. Mila speechless. I saw her hands, which were gripping the edge of the blanket, suddenly go limp. Perhaps that was the moment fear truly touched her. It was no longer the fear of aging or looking ugly, but the fear that she had almost traded her life for a few cheap compliments. Min Kang stood by the hospital bed, his eyes bloodshot. He turned his face away for a few seconds before saying, "It's a good thing we made it in time." I heard anger, fear, and the simmering regret of a son who almost lost his mother because he couldn't stop her sooner in his voice. I said nothing, simply picking up the warm cup of water Bin had placed on the bedside table. My mother-in-law looked at the water and then at me. Her gaze was strange, no longer sharp as usual, nor filled with a desire to nitpick me. She moved her lips, but ultimately hung her head. I said softly, "Mother, have some water. We can discuss right and wrong later, health comes first." To be honest, if I said I was no longer angry at that moment, I would be lying. The sting of her slap was still etched in my memory, and the false accusations she made against me with the Hang family still remained. But looking at the 61-year-old woman hunched over on the hospital bed, her face pale from having just escaped a trap, I couldn't bring myself to say another harsh word. Lawyer Kwok Tin also arrived not long after. He spread out all the documents recovered from the spa on a small table in the hallway, including a 250 million dong loan contract, service commitment forms, consultation slips, a 120 million dong post-op care addendum, plus copies of ID documents and some incomplete forms. Tin read them very carefully, his face growing more serious the more he read. The issue isn't just the loan. There are signs of intentionally luring clients into disadvantageous contracts, with harsh penalty clauses, vague extra fees, and this appendix here. He paused, flipped to another page, and then looked at Min Kang. This is an asset liquidation authorization. It hasn't been signed yet, but the property details are already filled in. Min Kang snatched the paper. I stood beside him, watching, my heart skipping a beat. The paper clearly stated the address of my family's current home. Although the asset description was missing a few details, it was enough to see they had already prepared a fallback plan if Ms. Mila couldn't pay. Min Kang gritted his teeth. They intend to take my mother's house. He turned around as if he wanted to go back to the spa immediately. I quickly grabbed his hand. Kang, don't. If you hit someone now, you'll turn from the victim into the perpetrator. He breathed heavily, his hands clenching into fists. After a while, he finally let go. I knew he was swallowing his anger inside. For a man of few words like Min Kang, seeing his mother get scammed to the point of nearly signing away their house was more painful than a slap in the face. Ms. Mila, lying in the hospital room, must have heard bits and pieces. She braced herself to sit up, her voice raspy. What assets? Which house? Who gave them the right to touch my house? Lawyer Tin stepped in, getting straight to the point. Ms. La, if you had signed this appendix while not in a clear state of mind, your house could have been used as collateral for a disguised debt. Even if you fought it later, it would be extremely exhausting to prove you were scammed. Ms. Mila looked at the paper, then at Min Kang, and then at me. Her expression shifted bit by bit, from confusion to fear, and finally, to humiliation. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Oh God, I was so stupid. That was the first time I heard her admit she was wrong. Even if it was just a phrase blurted out in panic, there was no more shouting, no more blaming her daughter-in-law, and no more prideful declarations of, I decide my own life. Ms. Thuy Dung was also later invited to the hospital to work with the lawyer. She brought a small USB drive, containing a list of over 30 women who had been consulted using the exact same script. Some were coerced into taking loans, others were pressured to upgrade their packages, and some were asked to pay additional fees after complications to get support. Dung said, her eyes red and watery. I'm not sure I can save everyone, but I don't want to stay silent anymore. I looked at the young woman, then at my mother-in-law. One had enabled them for too long out of fear, the other had almost lost everything out of pride. In that hospital room, cold with the smell of antiseptic, I suddenly realized that tragedy doesn't always strike in a single day. It starts with sweet words, a bit of insecurity, and a moment of wanting to prove you're no worse than anyone else. That night, Mrs. Mila cried for a long time. Min Kang sat beside her, but he no longer coddled her like an unconditionally doting son. He just stayed silent, letting her cry out all the confusion that had just shattered within her heart. As for me, I stood in the hallway looking at the files in the lawyer's hands, knowing that things could not end here. They had almost taken their money, their house, and even a life. If I only saved my mother-in-law and let it go, tomorrow another woman would walk right into that same trap. And this time, I don't want to just be the one putting out fires. I want to find the person who started it in the first place. The next morning, when my mother-in-law was finally discharged to rest and recover at home, I thought things would at least quiet down a little. But I was wrong. Those who are used to making money by trapping others never give up easily, especially when their trap has just been torn open in front of so many people. Around 9 a.m., my phone started buzzing continuously. At first, it was a few strange messages, then dozens of comments on the flower shop's page. I opened them to look, and my heart instantly sank. A video of Mrs. Thuy Mai was circulating in several middle-aged women's groups in the neighborhood. In the video, she sat in front of the camera, her bare face pale, her eyes red and puffy as if she had just been crying. She choked out, I never thought that at this age, I would still be envied and harmed just because I know how to look beautiful and live for myself. I truly care for Misla, yet her daughter-in-law brought people over to cause a scene and slander me for fraud. The more I watched, the colder I felt. She had spliced together clips of me at the coffee shop, at the spa, and even footage of me helping my mother-in-law, adding malicious commentary. The daughter-in-law doesn't want her mother-in-law to look beautiful, so she sabotages her at every turn. Within just a few hours, a swarm of fake accounts started flooding in to attack me. Some called me disrespectful, some claimed I was stingy with my mother-in-law, and others messaged the flower shop page directly. A daughter-in-law like you will grow old one day too. Don't be so cruel to the elderly. My hands went cold as I read them, but strangely, this time I wasn't panicked. Perhaps after so much has happened, I've realized one thing. Those who fear the truth the most have to shout the loudest to drown it out. Min Kang stood behind me, watching the screen for a moment before saying, let me call Lawyer Tin. We'll demand the video be taken down immediately. I shook my head, no need to rush. The more they post, the more evidence they leave behind. We won't fight back with insults, we'll fight back with proof. My mother-in-law sat on the sofa, still tired but holding her phone to watch. I thought she would be wavering again, thinking that I had brought shame upon her, but this time, she stared at the video for a long time before suddenly bursting into tears. She said in a raspy voice, she still wants to drag you into the mud instead of me. I turned to look at her. It was the first time she called me child in a tone without sarcasm or commands, just a very weary, soft voice. Like someone who just realized they had trusted the wrong person. That afternoon, Min Kang decided to take his mother to my biological mother's house for the night. Not because our house was larger, but because we were afraid Sao Dung's people or Thuy Mai would come to pressure us. I was very hesitant at first. For all these years, Ms. Mila had never truly respected my mother. She once hinted that because my parents were small-time merchants, their thinking was small too. Yet, when my mother opened the door and saw Ms. Mila, she only paused for a few seconds before stepping aside. Quote, come in, sister. You're not feeling well, don't stand out in the wind. My mother-in-law bowed her head, unable to say a single word. My mother cooked her a bowl of minced meat porridge and placed a warm glass of water beside it. Mrs. Mila held the spoon with trembling hands. My mother sat opposite her, speaking very softly. Sometimes elderly people aren't wrong because they are truly malicious, you know. It's often just the fear of being left behind, but whatever the fear, don't let bad people use it to lead you astray. That statement made my mother-in-law fall silent. She lowered her head, and a teardrop fell onto her wrinkled hand. Watching that, my heart suddenly felt heavy. There are things I said 100 times that she wouldn't hear, but when said by a peer, another woman, it touched her differently. In the evening, Thuy Dung sent me an audio file. She only wrote one sentence. Listen to this, I got it from the internal group before they locked me out. I turned on the speaker quietly in the room. Min Kang and Lawyer Tin listened together over the phone. Mrs. Tuyat Mai's voice rang out first. Quote, this Mrs. La is easy to manipulate. She's proud, just poke at her age and she jumps right up. Her daughter-in-law has a flower shop, she must have money. The son loves his mother but has a fragile male ego. Press him in the right place and he'll cave. Then came Sao Dung's voice. If the daughter-in-law won't pay, put her in the liability file and make up a story that she agreed to guarantee it. Small business owners fear scandal. A little threat and they'll cough up the money. Hearing that, my whole body felt like it was freezing over. It turns out from start to finish, they weren't just targeting my mother-in-law, they were targeting me and the small shop I built piece by piece. I thought I was just someone being wrongly accused by my mother-in-law because she was stingy. I never expected that in their eyes, I was already marked as a spare wallet. Min Kang slammed his hand hard onto the table. Quote, so from the beginning, they didn't just trick Mom, they planned to drag my wife into debt too. Lawyer Tin spoke very firmly. This file is important, but to leave them no room for denial, we need a confrontation with witnesses. Having relatives who heard one side is even better, so no one can say the family made it all up later. I was silent for a few seconds and then nodded. So, I'm doing this publicly, not to humiliate Mom, but to restore the truth for everyone. That evening, I messaged Hong Fuck, Ms. Dung, the male reporter, and several relatives who had called to scold us. Min Kang also called everyone in the family, saying briefly, everyone, please come tomorrow, I will clarify everything about Mom. Those who scolded Van should especially be present. My mother-in-law, sitting nearby, turned pale upon hearing this. She asked quietly, is it necessary to make such a big deal out of it? I looked at her, my voice slow but firm. If you hide, they will speak on your behalf. This time, we must let the truth speak for itself. She didn't answer, but I saw her nod very slightly. Just a small nod. But for someone like Mrs. Mila, that was the first time she agreed to step out of her shell of pride. The next morning, my house was more crowded than on any holiday or death anniversary. Relatives from my husband's side filled the living room, some on chairs, others leaning by the door, all looking grim yet unable to hide their curiosity. Some who had called to scold Min Kang for being unfilial the day before now glanced at me with wary eyes, as if they still didn't believe I was innocent. My mother-in-law was sitting in her private room. She wore a pale blue outfit, her hair tied low, her face pale and bare, no pearls, no makeup, and without that high-held posture she usually had. I stood at the door looking in, seeing her twisting her hands together. She asked in a hoarse voice, do I really have to go out there? I stepped inside and pulled up a chair to sit next to her. You have to go out. If you don't speak, others will speak for you. And when outsiders speak, they only choose the parts that benefit them. She looked at me for a long time. In her eyes, there was shame, fear, and something like a plea for help. I didn't blame her further. I just said I wouldn't force her to take all the blame in front of anyone. But the parts that are true, you must let everyone hear. Min Kang stood outside and called out gently, Mom, please come out. Mrs. Mila braced herself to stand up. Her steps were much slower than usual. When she reached the living room, the atmosphere instantly grew heavy. A distant aunt looked her over and sighed, La, how did things end up like this? No matter how your daughter-in-law is, you have to save face for the family, right? Before I could speak, Min Kang grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. He didn't explain at length. A recording with subtitles that Lawyer Tin had prepared immediately appeared on the screen. Tuyat Mai's voice rang out clearly. Quote, La is very vain. If you poke at the topic of aging, she jumps right up. Her daughter-in-law has a flower shop, She must have money. Her son loves his mother. If you pressure the right spot, you can get money out of him. The whole living room went deathly silent. Those who were just about to defend my mother-in-law all froze. Min Kang continued to play the next segment. This time it was Sao Dung's voice. Quote, if the daughter-in-law refuses to pay, put her in the joint liability file. Small business owners are afraid of scandal. Scare them a little and they'll cough up the money. I looked around the room. Uncle Tu bowed his head. Aunt Han pursed her lips. The third aunt, who once called to scold me for being a woman who valued money over everything, couldn't even look me in the eye anymore. Lawyer Tin placed each stack of papers on the table, his voice calm. This is the 250 million loan contract, and this is the 120 million post-operative care addendum. This is the power of attorney for acid disposal that hasn't been fully signed. And these are the images at CPA, where Mrs. Le was taken after drinking a liquid with unknown ingredients. Nam the reporter didn't film a close-up of my mother-in-law's face. That was something I had requested beforehand. I didn't want to turn her foolishness into a laughingstock online. I only wanted the truth to be recorded enough so that no one could distort it anymore. A cousin frowned. Quote, so what we heard from Mrs. Le all this time, that Van was forbidding her from getting medical treatment, wasn't true. Min Kang looked directly at that cousin. There was no illness here at all. My mother wanted a breast lift because she was incited by others. Van tried to stop her out of concern for the risks, and she even got slapped by my mother in front of me. The last sentence caused a stir in the whole room. My mother-in-law hung her head, and I saw her shoulders trembling, but this time I would no longer cover for her. There are things that, if kept hidden forever, will leave the victim with a false reputation indefinitely. Just as the atmosphere in the house was becoming suffocatingly tense, the sound of a car braking hard echoed outside the gate. A moment later, Mrs. Tuyat Mai walked straight into the yard. Following her were two strangers. She wore a black coat and sunglasses pulled low, but her voice was sickeningly sweet. Quote, La, why did you let your children make such a scene? Say something for me, I only want what's best for you. The whole room turned, and Mrs. Myla looked up at Mai. I saw her eyes flicker with emotion, but they no longer held that deluded look from before. She braced herself to stand and stepped out into the yard. I intended to follow, but Min Kang held my hand gently to let his mother speak. Mrs. Myla stood a few steps from Mrs. Tuyat Mai, her voice hoarse but clear. Quote, is it best for me that you plan to take my house? Mai was speechless. One of the two men with her immediately stepped forward, reaching toward Min Kang when he saw him filming with his phone. Quote, turn that off. Who gave you permission to record? Min Kang didn't back down. He said coldly, this is my home, you broke in, and I am recording to protect my family. Just as the man reached for the phone, the sound of motorcycles stopping echoed at the gate. Two local police officers and lawyer Tin stepped out, and Tin held up a file. Quote, we have submitted the report and initial evidence. Everyone is requested to keep order and not threaten those providing evidence. Mrs. Tuyat Mai's expression changed instantly. Her tearful facade vanished, replaced by panic. She looked at my mother-in-law. La, don't listen to them. How long have we been close? My mother-in-law laughed, but the sound broke like a sob. Is being close why you took a 20% commission from my loan? Mai turned deathly pale. That statement was loud enough for all the relatives in the yard to hear clearly. My mother-in-law turned to look at everyone, then suddenly bowed her head, her voice trembling. Quote, I was wrong. I was wrong because of my pride, my stupidity, and trusting a bad friend. But my daughter-in-law is not wrong. She is the one who saved me. The entire yard fell silent. Standing on the porch and hearing those words, my heart tightened. It wasn't because I was finally vindicated, but because I knew that to say those words, Mrs. Myla had to personally shatter the shell of pride she had held onto for so many years. Aunt Boss stepped forward, her expression strained. Van, dear, I didn't know the truth, so I spoke harshly the other day. Please forgive me. I looked at her, then at the relatives who were hanging their heads around us. I didn't want to use this opportunity to embarrass them further. I simply said that as family, it's not too late to stop once you know you're wrong. Ms. Myla turned to me, her eyes red-rimmed. For the first time in front of so many people, she didn't look at me like a daughter-in-law she had to tolerate. She looked at me like someone she owed a debt to. As for Ms. Tuyat Mai, she was asked to stay for questioning. Before being led away, she still tried to turn and glare at my mother-in-law with venomous eyes. But this time, Ms. Myla did not flinch. She stood tall, though her shoulders still trembled, finally understanding that saving face isn't about hiding mistakes, but daring to walk away from them before it's too late. After that confrontation, my house was no longer noisy. But that silence was not peace. It was like the stillness after a great thunderstorm, when everyone knows the yard is still full of broken branches and shattered tiles, but no one has the strength to go out and clean them up yet. Ms. Tuyat Mai and her two companions were summoned for questioning. Sao Dung also couldn't maintain the smooth persona he had at the spa that night. The documents, recordings, internal messages, and Thuy Dung's testimony were organized into clear folders by lawyer Quoc Tin. The male reporter only used the necessary footage, masking the faces of the elderly, especially my mother-in-law. That evening, Min Kang asked me, "Do you want to post it all? To let people know how they deceived my mother." I was silent for a moment, then shook my head. Seeking justice is different from turning my mother into a laughingstock. My mother was wrong, but she was also a victim. Min Kang looked at me for a long time. Perhaps he didn't expect that after everything his mother had done, I would still preserve some of her dignity. He gently held my hand, his voice dropping, "Thank you." I didn't answer. I didn't do it out of nobility. I only realized that if everything is cruelly exposed, the person hurt most might not be the scammer, but rather the victim who was lured by their own fear of aging, of being ugly, or of falling behind. There are some shames that don't need the world to pile on to be painful enough. In the following days, many other victims arrived one after another. Some brought installment loan papers, some showed photos of complications, and some just sat and cried because they dared not tell their husbands or children how much money they had borrowed. Hong Fuc brought along a woman named Men, who looked thin, withered, and had dark, sunken eyes. Men explained that she only believed their promise that her husband would love her again after the procedure. She had signed a package worth nearly 300 million, then was threatened to pay more for care, or else bear the complications herself. Listening to them, my mother-in-law sat in the corner, head bowed. She no longer dared to look at anyone with that arrogant gaze. Every now and then, when someone mentioned Tuyat Mai, her shoulders would tremble. I knew she was seeing herself in every one of those stories. Thuy Dung was also guided by the lawyer to file a formal report. She was terrified, constantly asking if they would shift all the blame onto her. I looked at her, remembering that evening in the alleyway when the young girl tremblingly handed us the stack of photocopied files. I said, "You were wrong to stay silent before, but you chose to speak up at the right time. Now just stay on the right path, don't hide anymore." Lawyer Tin worked very thoroughly, requesting the cancellation of my mother-in-law's loan contract due to signs of misleading advice and maneuvering her into signing under non-transparent circumstances. About 250 million that hadn't been fully spent yet was requested to be temporarily frozen to serve the investigation. The 120 million appendix and the power of attorney for assets, which were invalid due to incomplete signatures, were still included in the file as evidence of their intent to misappropriate. Upon hearing that the house was no longer tied to the debt, Myla collapsed into her chair, covering her face with both hands, sobbing softly. She had nearly lost the house her husband left for the children. Min Kang stood by the window, not turning back right away. A moment later, he said, "The house is saved, but trust isn't something that can be kept just because you say so, Mom." That sentence left her speechless. I knew Min Kang was still hurting. He loves his mother, but he cannot pretend that nothing ever happened. The final twist came on Tuesday afternoon, when Sao Dung started exposing their kickback scheme. Mrs. Tuyat Mai didn't just refer clients out of enthusiasm, but received a commission for every successful loan application. But what surprised me was that Mrs. Mai herself had once been a victim too. She had borrowed money for beauty treatments, ended up drowning in debt, and then turned to being a decoy to get her loans reduced. My mother-in-law was stunned upon hearing this. So she was also deceived once. Lawyer Tin nodded, saying it was possible, but having been a victim does not excuse the fact that she then went on to harm others. I looked at Mrs. Myla and said softly, "Being pitiful doesn't give you the right to harm others." Mom, she didn't argue, she just bowed her head for a long time. Perhaps for the first time, she understood that a woman can be both pitiful and blameworthy. Mrs. Tuyat Mai was once dragged into the mud, but instead of climbing out, she turned around and dragged others down with her. That evening, my mother-in-law took the initiative to ask for Ms. Hong Fuc's number. She held the phone for a long time before she dared to call. When the other end picked up, her voice was hoarse. Quote, "Fuck, that day at the restaurant, I called you a vulgar woman. I was wrong. If you hadn't made a scene that day, I surely would have sunk deeper." The other end was silent for a few seconds, then Ms. Fuc's voice rang out, calm but heavy. I don't need your apology. I just hope you don't let your pride drag you into a hole ever again." My mother-in-law burst into tears, not loudly or dramatically, just the choked sobs of someone who had finally seen the pit beneath her feet. I stood outside the room, and hearing those words, my heart sank as well. The woman who once slapped me over 250 million, who once cursed me for being stingy with her, now sits there, smaller and more fragile than ever. I don't feel smug because I understand that, in the twilight of life, everyone has their own fears. Some fear illness, some fear loneliness, some fear being forgotten. My mother-in-law fears aging, fears losing, and fears no longer being looked at with admiration. But any fear, if not kept in check by reason, can turn into a noose, and this time, that noose almost tightened around my entire family's neck. A week later, when things had settled down, my mother-in-law called me into her room. Her room was still the same old room, with a large mirror in the corner and the cosmetics still arranged on the table. But for some reason, everything looked completely different that day. Perhaps because the person sitting before me was no longer the Mila who was always perfectly made up and spoke with words as sharp as knives. She opened a drawer and took out a small, worn velvet box containing the gold earrings she had kept since her wedding day. She pushed the box toward me, her voice hoarse and low. "This is for you. Consider it my apology for what happened that day." I looked at the earrings and gently pushed them back. It wasn't that I was still too angry to accept them, it was because I understood that some wounds cannot be mended with gold or silver. I told her I didn't need her to compensate me with things like this. I only hope that from now on, you won't use the title of mother-in-law to trample on my dignity again. Mrs. Mila lowered her head for a long time. Her hands rested on her knees, her fingers, thin after the recent turmoil, trembling slightly. After a while, she spoke. "I just thought that as a mother, I could say whatever I wanted. I thought a daughter-in-law entering this house had to endure me and obey me. Now I realize that even family members must respect one another." Hearing those words, my heart went still. If it had been before, I might have wept waiting for this apology. But when it actually came, I didn't feel like I had won. I only felt sorry for the many years that had passed, sorry for the heavy meals, the times I swallowed my tears, and the slap that, no matter how much time passes, can never be treated as if it never happened. Min Kang sat next to me, silent for a moment, then said to his mother, "Mom, Van and I have discussed it. We are going to move out for a while." Mrs. Mila looked up abruptly, a familiar panic flashing in her eyes, but this time she didn't scream, didn't blame, and didn't accuse me of turning her son against her. She only asked very softly, "Are you both abandoning me?" I looked at her, my voice as gentle as possible. "We won't abandon you, but we can't continue living together as we did before. Mom, there are things that need space before we can find peace again." Min Kang held my hand and continued, "I will still take care of you. I'll send your monthly living expenses clearly, and I'll take you to your doctor's appointments. But from now on, any loans, documents, or major expenses must be discussed with us first. No more signing things or hiding them, leaving the whole family to clean up the mess." Mrs. Miley's tears began to fall as she heard that. This time I knew they weren't crocodile tears. They were the tears of someone who realized she had personally damaged the very place that should have been her final sanctuary. I spoke plainly. "I can overlook your impulsiveness, but I cannot act as if that slap that day never happened. I need time, and I need you to understand that forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was." She nodded very slowly. "I understand." Months later, the case of the fraudulent spa network was handled. Some victims were guided through the procedures to claim their money back. Some were at least able to escape their absurd loans before it was too late. Thuy Dung quit her old job for good. Later, Hong Phuk hired Dung to help out at her small healthcare shop. When we met again, Dung bowed to thank me, but I just told her she saved herself before she could save anyone else. My mother-in-law also gradually changed. At first, that change was very clumsy. She no longer joined those ageless beauty groups and spent less time looking in the mirror. In the morning, she went to the park to walk, and in the afternoon, she did calisthenics with the ladies in the neighborhood. Occasionally on weekends, she stopped by the flower shop to help me trim leaves and branches. One day, she accidentally broke some roses and apologized awkwardly, which made me laugh. Small things like that had never happened before. One afternoon, she stood looking at the lotus flowers I had just arranged in a ceramic vase. The late afternoon sun fell upon her hair, which was already turning gray. She whispered softly that getting old isn't as scary as living in constant fear of being called old. Hearing that, I simply smiled and didn't answer. There are lessons one must pay for with tears, with fear, and by nearly losing what is most precious before they truly sink in. I didn't want to turn that moment into a lecture. I just quietly placed another lotus stem into the vase, letting it stand still among the green leaves. Not long after, my husband and I moved to a small apartment about 2 kilometers from his mother's house, not far enough to sever ties, but not so close as to feel stifling anymore. Every evening, Min Kang calls to check on his mother. We still visit for dinner on weekends, but everything is different now. There are boundaries, there is respect, and there is just enough space so that no one hurts anyone else again. It took me years to understand that dealing with people isn't about enduring until you lose yourself, nor is it about winning by driving others into a corner. Sometimes the kindest thing is to pull someone back from the edge of the abyss. Even if that person once hurt you, after saving them, you must remain sharp enough not to let them drag you down with them. My life didn't suddenly become perfect after that incident. But every morning when I open the flower shop and look at the newly arranged bouquets, I feel my heart grow lighter. Some heartbreaks don't end with brilliant laughter, but with a peaceful breath. And for me, finding peace after all that noise is already a beautiful enough beginning.